Before we dive in, a quick heads up. Quantum Journey's online 4-week live immersive healing ancestral, past life, and family trauma workshop is almost here and seats are disappearing fast. This is for the spiritually sensitive, feeling the pull to break old patterns and reclaim your energy. February 19th, 2026 is your moment. Don't wait. Secure your spot now at www.quantumjourneygo.com/workshops. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the Past Lives Cafe. I am your host, Chione, an intuitive energy worker and acclaimed past life regressionist. Come with me as we journey through the spiral of time to forgotten places. Hey, Kathrine Eady. Many of you may have heard her incredible story on the Mystical Mermaid Lounge. She had a lot to share about the way she grew up, some religious trauma that she is absolutely healing through. And I've been so fortunate to meet her along this journey and to use her advice to become more intimate with our grandmother Moon. I am finding her relationship with our grandmother to be more special than I could have ever imagined. And to add to my amazing journey in getting to know Kathrine even more, she asked to do what we call a 3 lives past life regression, and I was more than happy to facilitate that for her. So she is joining us here today to tell us all about that experience. Welcome, Kathrine.
Hi, Chione. Thank you so much for having me.
I am dying to know why you wanted to have a 3 life regression. You were one of the holdouts.
I was.
We were part of a container together where we were learning a lot of different spiritual principles, and which is how I met Kathrine. And I offered it as something to kind of give back to others, and no pressure. And a lot of folks were interested in doing it, but Kathrine was definitely one of the holdouts. So
yeah, I think
why were you reticent, if you were? And then what made you decide to do it?
I think I was a little bit hesitant to do it just because of kind of the uncertainty and skepticism that I had about reincarnation and past lives. And I wasn't really sure what I believed about that. And so I wasn't sure if I should do the session. But I ended up deciding to do it because I think a lot of it goes back to what you were saying a moment ago in your introduction about my religious upbringing and kind of deconstructing everything that I grew up with. And of course, I think we all face the age-old question of like, where did we come from and where do we go after this? And after my spiritual deconstruction from the conservative Christianity that I grew up with, I kind of landed in this agnostic atheist space for a while. I wasn't really sure if there was anything supernatural beyond this life. But when I came onto the witchcraft path, at first I identified more or less as an agnostic witch, not really incorporating deity into my practice at all. But I was just curious, that question keeps coming up over and over of like, how did we get here? Where are we going? And so I was just wanting to be open to the possibilities and kind of experiment and explore what could be. And you felt like a very safe person to explore that with. So yeah, that's how I kind of ended up deciding to go ahead and try it out, regardless of where I landed on it and what I actually believed.
I am going to ask you a question that you may not be prepared for.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Imagine that. Me asking Kathrine a question that she has no idea where it's coming from. So, since you've had a lot more fundamental biblical training, if you will, and exposure than I have, I'm interested in understanding why reincarnation isn't considered a fundamental accepted Christian principle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm certainly not a theologian, and I never studied the Bible like in college or anything. But I have had a lot of exposure to Bible teachings throughout my life, and kind of the basic Christian understanding that I was taught about like our creation and our death and that whole cycle of life is that, God creates us. He kind of puts a soul into our physical body at the moment of conception. And that that soul, that life essence comes from God. And we live our physical life, and that physical life is meant to give us an opportunity to like accept Jesus as our savior and learn about God and grow closer to God. And then when we die, at the moment that our soul leaves our body, we're either going to go to heaven or hell and receive our eternal, reward or punishment. So I think that probably explains why reincarnation is not a part of the Christian tradition that I grew up in, because it's kind of all about this end of the cycle, this reward or punishment that you receive after death.
So, in more simpler terms, for people like me, uh, no do-overs.
Right. Yeah, it's like you have this one opportunity.
Gotcha. Okay, that explains a lot because I couldn't see the conflict from where I sit as to
Mhm.
how that would make this journey of a soul any more or less spiritual or connected
Mhm.
to one deity or one God. But if the Christian principle is here's your shot, take it and learn while you're here and hopefully get it, then that makes perfectly good sense. Yee, that's
Right.
scarier than what I remember.
It is. It's a lot of pressure.
So a lot of pressure. That's cute. Yeah, a lot. Hence our discussions on the Mermaid Lounge about fear-based traditions. So
Oh yeah.
yeah. So I was thrilled that you were so easily connectable and connected with your higher self and the lives that you were easily experiencing. I didn't doubt it for a second, and I didn't realize that you were skeptical um, until you had shared that with me prior to scheduling, obviously. And so I thought that the threads of your different lives and the lessons of your different lives were really meaningful. And I was just wondering if you felt comfortable kind of walking us through your first life that you experienced, and then we can kind of, analyze that a little bit, put on our Freud glasses, and then look at the other ones as well.
Yeah. So the first life that you guided me through, I was a young woman. I would say probably late teens, early 20s type age. And I was in a desert community, pre, technological era. I'm not sure exactly what year it would have been, but it was very basic subsistence living. And I found myself, as soon as I arrived in this life, I found myself hiding in the bushes and trying to stay away from people. And um, I felt this overwhelming sense of anxiety and fear. And that was something that was very surprising about the whole experience. I didn't have a lot of preconceived notions going in because I'm kind of generally skeptical about the whole thing anyway, so I didn't know what to expect. But I think I viewed it as I would almost be like an outsider watching it as a TV show. I wasn't expecting to be in the body of the person in that life, but it was very much a presence in like it was like my soul was united with that body for that period of time, and I felt all of the feelings, and I had the memories and the understanding of what was going on. And the anxiety was, my body was kind of shaking, like it just felt very overwhelming. And I looked down and saw bruises on my arms, and um I wasn't sure at that moment what I was scared of or what I was hiding from. But as you guided me through this life, we kind of explored the community and figured out who I was and where I was. And I found that I was a young woman who lived with her parents and siblings in like a tent type community. And I was so anxious and overwhelmed because I was like coming of age, and my father had this expectation that I was going to marry this man in the community. Um, I think it was just socially expected, women get married and have children. And I think he viewed it as a way that I would be secure. This man was stable and successful, and I didn't want to marry that man. And my father and I had kind of gotten into an argument about it, and he had physically assaulted me because he was angry with me. And that was where the bruising came from, and the anxiety and the fear. And as we further explored the life, I realized that there was an older woman in the community who had never married. And she was kind of an herbalist, a healer in this community. And in some ways, she was a bit of an outcast. It was like people didn't fully trust her. Maybe they viewed her as a witch or as someone who, was aligning herself with the devil or dark forces. And that was where maybe she got her power from to heal people. But at the same time, when they needed her, they would go to her if they needed help with a physical ailment. Um, and I found myself in this life really admiring her and having this desire to follow in her footsteps. And even though she was kind of on the outskirts of society and didn't really fit the mold of what was acceptable in this community, I really found her way of life desirable, and kind of having this sense of greater purpose of healing, and also kind of having the autonomy and the authority over my own life to decide what I wanted to do.
I was really surprised when you had spoken about her presence. I was less surprised about the not wanting to get married, especially to someone that had been chosen for you. And I think at least the trope is, right? Every young woman's dream is to fall in love with their partner, whoever that ends up being, and that we have autonomy in choosing who that individual was. So that was a little less surprising to me. That's an awesome cup. It's like a
Thank you.
tree.
And it has witch hats on it.
No wonder I love it. I'll have to cut that part out. Just so everyone knows, Kathrine just picked up the most amazing, it looks like a tree trunk, like the way that it came out and the color of it.
It's
And
a
the
perfect
hats,
shape.
yeah, the hats look like bark. It's just really cool. But I digress. It's so easily distracted, right? Um, so I was less surprised by that. What did surprise me was this introduction of this healing individual. And I thought, as far back as this experience felt, like, was it Ben-Hur time frame? You know what I mean? It just had that feeling of that desert caravan, Middle Eastern, potentially, or African Sahara type of feel to it, where people would be nomadic and move around in tents. I was less, I'm sorry, I was really surprised that this woman came into the picture, not just that she existed, but that you were drawn to her. And you were drawn to, and I remember asking a lot of questions um, about what it is about a young woman that, for for in most cases, as a young person, we want to please our parents. We want to, I don't want to say follow in traditional footsteps, but essentially that's the way we're raised, and expectations are implanted in us, for lack of better terms, from birth. And yet here you were, this young person not only not wanting to get married, and kind of shunning that tradition, but then aspiring to work with somebody who was considered an outcast. It was really surprising to me. And if I recall, you wanted to learn her ways and understand her depth of knowledge, and you weren't scared of her at all, I don't think.
No, no, I didn't have any fear surrounding her. I think the overwhelming feeling that I kept getting when I was in this life was I just want to be left alone. And I think with the type of culture and community that it was, I didn't have a lot of privacy. I had very little autonomy over my life. And I saw this woman who, even though she was an outcast, she could kind of just live as she pleased. She kind of lived a little bit separated from the community. She wasn't right in the center of town. Um, and so she had this level of freedom that no one, certainly not the women in the community, had. And I remember my mother in this life was very unhappy. And I saw her path of getting married and having children and being this traditional wife and mother, and how miserable she seemed and how little freedom she had. And then on the opposite end, you have this woman who has a lot of freedom. And even though she may not have a lot of friends or um, be accepted in the community, she has this status of healer. And the fear that people had with her kind of conveyed a level of respect as well. It was like this mixed emotion that the people in the community had toward her. And I just found that very desirable.
Almost like women weren't venerated beyond maybe being I was going to say homemaker, but in this case, tent maker.
Yeah.
But the home, right? So they're
Mhm.
responsible for that as the traditional, expectation, having children, raising the family, and providing for that, which did not appeal to you at all. And her absolute ability to live the way she wanted to live and to be respected makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, do you think that's a witch wound? We talk a lot about how females, whether witchcraft or that path, the more natural based practices appeal to people. There is this archetype of the witch wound that may run through our lives with regard to being an outlier, practicing whether it's the healing arts, magical arts, more nature-based practices, and then being persecuted for them. And so that archetype can show up in a whole lot of different ways. Do you think this is indicative of a witch wound in you?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Having had that experience of witnessing this other woman who's practicing, these nature type healing practices, and seeing her as an outcast, and even following in her footsteps myself, I think that makes a lot of sense that has carried over into even my current life,
Mm-hmm.
and the hesitance that I feel to share with the people around me what it is that I'm practicing and doing. I think that makes a lot of sense that is related.
Very interesting. So the feeling that we got before we went to the next life, you definitely felt that you left your family, that nuclear family, and you did end up working with her.
Yes, yes, that was the feeling that I was left with.
And that ended well, if I recall. I don't think it
Yes.
was the cause of you being killed, or you didn't seem to have that sense that it was an early death related to that in any way.
Right. It felt like a peaceful ending to that life.
And you had to walk away from your family
I did.
and in large part the community.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to commit myself to this path, to the detriment of my acceptance as a member of the community.
What incredible strength. I remember thinking and we'll talk about the three lives in total and the threads, but I remember thinking what incredible strength that soul had to not just say this isn't for me, but then turn and make a decision that would further solidify her separation from tradition. And what a commitment, because I recall not just, hey, this not only is emblematic of autonomy and emblematic of not caring what other people think and not being controlled by that, but by choosing something that would help others. And that was part of what drew you to that specific healing path. You had this higher goal for yourself and for other people.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty amazing. And
yeah, it was really interesting to observe it as, someone who's not currently experiencing that life, but perhaps it was me in a past life. And it was kind of a feeling of pride that I had in myself, in that individual that chose to walk that path.
I was just going to say that, Kathrine. Were you
Yeah.
proud of yourself? I was so proud of myself from 500 years ago.
Yes.
Good for me. So, so with that, you then we then walked you to another lifetime, which was similar, but in a very different time period, in a very different geographical location. And I will let you speak to it, but there were some very specific threads that continued in that life.
Yes, the second life that I journeyed through was it was confusing at first. I remember kind of coming into this life in a cave, and I felt very different. And like I said with the other one, I was very present in the body of this individual, and I couldn't figure out why it was that I felt so different, and it was making it hard to even look around or figure out where I was. And I eventually realized that I was a man in this life. I had a male body. And that was why it was so confusing, because it felt so different, and it's difficult to describe how it felt different. But as a female body in this life, that's what I'm used to. And so it was a very interesting experience, kind of waking up as a man. But once I realized that I was in a male body, it kind of allowed me to start exploring around me. And I realized that I was like a warrior type role in this world. And in that moment, it seemed as if I had maybe been out with a scouting party, and we had gotten caught in a storm and kind of separated, scattered to different shelters. And as we continued to explore this life, I found the community that I lived in. I found that I was fairly young, maybe in my 20s. I had a wife and a young daughter, like a baby. Um, I had, parents and friends, and this life was very happy and fulfilled. I would say of the three lives that I experienced, this was the happiest. And I remember looking a little bit kind of into the memories to see what the political situation was, and it seems like there was some conflict, politically, maybe regionally, at this time. But my life as an individual was very happy and fulfilled. And the other standout memory from that life was actually me getting wounded or injured. And I remember some people kind of picking me up and carrying me into a house and laying me out on a table. And my family was there, and I kind of knew that I wasn't going to make it through this injury. And even now, just talking about it, it's getting me teary eyed. I had this sense of such deep grief um, that I was going to be leaving my family.
Right.
I didn't want to leave my wife and my daughter and this life that I loved so much. And I, even laying there during this past life regression, my present physical body I was crying because I felt this sense of grief about leaving them.
that was the thing that I think a lot of people are surprised about when they are regressing, that it feels just like you were there, that it's just such a very real and visceral and palpable experience. And if I recall, the grief really, and you just said it so eloquently, wasn't as much about your leaving as it was about concern for this family you were leaving behind, and that you were concerned about their welfare, and you love them so very much that the transference of, oh no, I'm not going to be able to live with them, to they're not going to be able to live with me as the provider, as the sole caretaker, as the person with the responsibility for keeping them as well as the community safe, I think was a very big theme. And also one that I thought was a thread from the first life you experienced, this level of responsibility for other people's well-being, I think. And it was hard to watch you feel that. Um, did you find that to be a healing or at least a cathartic experience in any way?
I think I don't know if healing would be the right term because it was just such a sense of heaviness and grief. I think it was very gratifying to know that I did experience such a happy and loving life. But the grief just kept lingering on long after our session, and even now talking about it, it's still bringing up those
Hmm.
feelings of grief. I think healing could probably be found in working through those emotions some more, but I don't know if I'm there yet.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I totally get that. I love that you felt gratified with that life. And I have to ask you, and I know it's hard to put this into words because gender is difficult to define, right? We, I don't know if we feel female or male, or if we're conditioned to feel female or male, but you definitely felt different from a female. When I was interviewing River in another episode, she had described feeling a sense of freedom that she never felt in the body of a female, and also an incredibly heavy level of duty. What are your thoughts about that? Would you say that resonates? And what are your other impressions?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to describe it. There was certainly a feeling of freedom that I definitely didn't experience in the first life that we explored. The duty definitely came into it a lot, especially as kind of a warrior of this community, um, a protector and provider for my family. I think there was a level of confidence, is the word that comes to mind. I just felt this kind of presence of mind and sense of self that I don't think I've ever experienced as a female. There was a complete lack of the day-to-day anxieties that I'm used to experiencing as a female. Of course, there were anxieties about like the safety of my community and things like that. And when I left my family, how they would make out without me. But just the little things that come up every single day as a woman that I feel very anxious about, that just it wasn't there. And it felt like a clear, peaceful mind like I've never experienced.
Well said. And
Thank you.
I mean, that is, I mean, let me say it this way. Often we don't know what we feel until we don't feel it. And so every day, if we walked around as females saying, I don't feel safe in this world, I feel like at any moment, I could be, and list a million things. I could be robbed. I could be attacked. I could be raped. I mean, there's just this level of awareness we have around us at all times, and it's taught from the time we're very young. We need to be careful. We need to be aware. And to not have that nagging in the back of our minds, I can't imagine what a great level of liberation that must be. And you got to feel it.
Just for a short period of time. Yeah, I think as women, a lot of us tend to live in this state of kind of hypervigilance, um,
Absolutely.
because of, like you said, because of what we're taught and because of the way our society is structured, and we don't feel like we have maybe the protections that men have. Many of us are kind of physically smaller and feel vulnerable. And I think that hypervigilance that we live in is very exhausting and draining, and it uses up so much of our day-to-day emotional capacity and resources. And it was a very interesting experience, even just for, you know, 20 or 30 minutes, not having that.
Maybe that's where we need to meditate toward.
Yeah.
We all need to be some big man in our minds and just feel that. And so the last life that you experienced was also one of incredible strength, um, responsibility, and also having to make decisions for yourself that were not necessarily in keeping with tradition, but was required of you because of what was going on environmentally and politically. So I'll turn it over to you and let you explain what you saw, and we can kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Sure. So the last life, I found myself back in a woman's body, and I was in a kind of a tall apartment building looking out the window, and I was overlooking a city street. And this was much more recent history because there were cars on the road and things like that. And as we continued to explore this life, I felt this sense of anxiety here as well. And I realized it was because this was during a war. I feel like it was World War II, and my husband was off fighting. And it seemed like it had been quite a while since I had heard from him. And so there was this anxiety about his safety and just the general state of the world and what was going on. And as we continued to explore the life, I realized that my husband and I had actually met like in our hometown. We had grown up in a more rural kind of farming community. And after we married, we moved to the city so that he could pursue his studies. He was studying for a law degree. And then while he was studying at university, the war broke out and he ended up having to go fight. And so I was kind of left behind in this, relatively new to me city, having to, take a job and hold things down at home with all of this anxiety surrounding the war and my husband being gone. And I remember when I was in this apartment, there was another woman there, and she was like my roommate. I think I had taken a roommate for the companionship, also to kind of help share the responsibility of the house and the bills, since I was there alone with my husband away. And the woman felt very important. And I hope to be able to explore this more in the future, because it felt like we were very close, and like she was a very important part of my life, but she was very kind of hazy in this memory. And I couldn't quite make out, who she was or exactly what our relationship was, if we had known each other prior to her becoming my roommate. But she was there and she felt like a very important presence. And then eventually, as I progressed through this life, my husband did come back from the war safely, and we had struggled before the war broke out with some infertility issues. I had been unable to have children, but we did eventually go on to have children. and kind of had ups and downs in life and in our marriage. We had some issues. We eventually worked through them, and we grew old together. He did obtain his law degree and was a part of a stable, successful law practice there in the city. So that life it wasn't unhappy. I took pleasure in my children and the friendship I feel like that I had with the woman who was my roommate. And there were good times in the marriage as well, but that life felt very overwhelmingly directed by duty and responsibility and doing what I had to do, even though it wasn't always, what I wanted to do.
That was one of the threads that I thought was so poignant in all of the lives was this sense of duty, this expectation, and whether you were accepting of it. So in the first life, obviously, you did not accept that. Your sense of duty was, or perhaps you felt that your family's sense of duty that they had expected from you was misplaced. And so your sense of duty fell elsewhere. In the second life, you fully embraced your sense of duty, and that ended up to a large extent being your demise.
Yeah.
And then in the third life, back as a female, again, this sense of having to pick up where the husband had to abandon you and this situation for reasons out of his control, World War II. You were having to then step in his shoes and just suddenly assume so much responsibility in a place that you were not familiar with. You were a small town or farm type of, it came from a small town or farm type of environment, more rural, and bam, all of a sudden you're in this, I think it was New York, where you felt you were living, or someplace very similar.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't accustomed to the busyness and to just all the things that are so very different. And to just jump in and assume the duties that you had to, even working, had to have been just incredibly overwhelming, yet you just did it. It was just something, it didn't even seem like you second guessed or it. I remember asking you, I'm sorry, I'm thinking through this as I talk. I remember asking you, why didn't you go home? Why didn't you go back to your family? Or if I didn't ask, I was thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even seem like that was even an option to you.
Yeah, I thinking back, I don't remember a specific reason that I didn't go back to my family in that life. I think there was this sense of like, we're still going to be here in the city once the war is over. My husband is still kind of in the middle of his studies, and so maybe we needed to keep, the place that we were living, or something like that. There was just this sense that we needed to continue what we had started in this city. So I guess I didn't want to abandon that and our dreams and plans and hopes for the future.
Yeah, that's a good point. You were living in an expectation that he would return, almost like if you left, you had given up on him.
Right.
I had no idea that that roommate had such an importance. I just thought she was someone that you were friends with or became friendly with. And I would love to hear after you meditate on it or whatever you do to explore that more. I would love to hear what you come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the haziest things in the whole experience in all three lives. And yet she felt so important. So I definitely want to explore that more.
One of the things that I wanted to ask is if you learned anything throughout that process that surprised you, either about the process or about what you found or both.
The process, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, the process was surprising to me in how present I felt in each of the lives and how for that period of time, that was my life and that was me in that body. The experiences and feelings and actions that I saw and experienced through the three lives, I don't think that they were really surprising. They felt like the decisions that I would have made if I had been born in a different time and place. Like it still felt very much like me, even when I was in a male body. Like, family is very important to me, and I do feel this level of responsibility for things. And I think that might be what was most surprising is how much like me it felt in each of the lives. And it really didn't feel like anything was out of the ordinary.
I was so surprised at how much I felt like me.
Yeah.
Do you think that you, in any of your family lineage that you've been recently looking into, that you have been your own ancestor, or if any of those lives you could have been your own ancestor?
I think that's very possible. The second life where I was in the male body would align most closely with where my own ancestry came from. As you and I discussed it, we were kind of thinking this was like Western European, maybe like the British Isles, Wales, Scotland, somewhere like that. I know that I was a man with light skin and red hair. Um, and it was kind of this very tribal type society. And I have ancestry that comes from that area, so that would probably be the most likely to be linked to kind of being my own ancestor.
That's neat.
Yeah.
I love that. I am really fascinated by this idea that we could be our own ancestor in many cases. And the reason I'm even thinking about this is because ancestral trauma is something that can happen in a number of ways, right? And if we had been our own ancestor, then that trauma has been living on even more than just in the collective, meaning you were part of the collective that is now coming full circle back to you. And I thought your comment about looking into that grief that lingered after the session may be a good healing point at some time for you to explore brings me back to not even just ancestral trauma and hurt, but even past life hurt. Is it something that as a past life that lingers in our souls or our subconscious for us to work through, or a good thing to work through? These questions about how deep we truly are and how much I'm having the same issue. As I'm sure you recall, I have this issue all the time. I have constant drainage. I need to move to Arizona, um, or maybe Africa. I don't know. I need to
Mm.
be in the desert somewhere. Um, but anyway, this idea that not just pain, but also pleasure and duty and community concern being a thread throughout your lives and also being so indicative of who you are today, I think is fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. Throughout my three life experience, I felt this constant tension between this feeling of like wanting to be independent and chart my own path, and the tension that was held in with this sense of duty and responsibility, and trying to find a way to live that out in each of the lives. It was really interesting, and even seeing how that plays into my current life, and that feeling of, making my own way in the world, making my own decisions, and also feeling responsible to family and community and the sense of duty. It was a really interesting parallel between each of the lives.
Really, it really was. Let me ask you this. Do you think that if you delved into any of those lives or any other lives that maybe you explore in the future is an interesting term, that you could potentially heal the pain that you felt back then? So, in other words, in our 3D world, things happen here, and then we move forward to here, and then we work through it in the future. But there's this idea that with ancestral trauma or even past life trauma, that we're able to heal today and let it reverberate in the past.
I think that's very possible. When you start talking about, time as an abstract concept, it really starts blowing my mind. um,
Right?
but I think, I have very little understanding of how time works, and I think it's very possible that, there's some element of this where everything is kind of happening all at once. And I think that work that I'm doing now could very well affect, what we describe as past lives. But, are they really past, or are they present, or
Interdimensional, right.
yes.
I love that. It opens up this whole level of opportunity to make an impact even on things in the past that in a 3D linear world just seems impossible.
Yeah.
So overall, are you happy you did this? Are you happy you had the experience?
Yes, I am very, very happy that I kind of went out on a limb and explored something that I wasn't really sure how I felt about it. It was a really good experience. And, I still, if someone asks me, like, do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe in past lives? I still don't know what my answer would be.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of whether, what I was experiencing was a past life, or some expression of my higher self, or,
Right.
a parallel universe, or, even my own imagination creating these lives related to experiences I've had in this life, regardless of what it was I was experiencing, it was very powerful and valuable, and something I've thought about a lot since then and will continue to, especially with our discussion today talking about the healing and things like that. It'll be something that I think about for years to come.
Well, I can't thank you enough for letting me go on that journey with you through those 3 lives, and for also letting us talk a bit about it here today and being honest about some of the feelings that those experiences brought up for you. I appreciate your generosity in sharing yourself with me now for the third time. And I will put the other 2 interviews with Kathrine, which were so poignant and got a lot of downloads, by the way, because they were so poignant. And there are so many people that find your message of recovering from religious trauma so relatable, sadly, and also so inspiring. And so, to that end, your willingness to jump into something that you haven't been readily taught to be explorable, I give you the most kudos, and I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing with me today.
Thank you so much for facilitating that past life experience.
Have a great day, Kathrine, and thank you so much. And separately, enjoy your travels. Have a good and safe trip.
Thank you.
See you soon, sweetie.
All right, bye.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in my services, visit me at www.quantumjourneygo.com or drop me a note at pastlivescafe.buzzsprout.com. Stay well and be present.